I enjoy playing the music. I enjoy the crowds coming in and enjoying the music. There's a great energy exchange out there. Whether it's me or whoever the entertainer is, people come a long way, pay a lot of money to see somebody they like, and when they come see me, that's great.
92 years old, a collapsed lung, a voice reduced to a fragile whisper, and still Willie Nelson keeps walking onto stages like time never signed off on him.
After fighting off a cold and missing several shows, Willie Nelson took to the stage last night at the San Antonio Stock Show and Rodeo.
Because this isn't just a performance anymore. It feels like something far heavier. How do you keep singing when everyone who once sang beside you is gone? Johnny Cash, Waylon Jennings, Merle Haggard, Kris Kristofferson. Their voices have faded into history, but Willie is still here, carrying what they left behind. And as he grips that worn guitar under the lights, one truth hangs in the air. He isn't just playing songs. He's holding the last echo of an entire generation. So, the question becomes, when that echo finally fades, what exactly are we left with? Cotton fields and $5 guitars. They all came from the same place. Not the same town, but the same kind of dirt. The kind of dirt that teaches you early that nobody is coming to help you, that everything you get, you fight for, and that the only thing standing between you and a life of picking cotton until your back gives out is whatever talent God put in your hands, and whatever stubborn refusal to quit your mama put in your spine. Willie Nelson picked cotton in Abbott, Texas, a town so small it barely showed up on a map, and learned guitar from his grandparents before he was old enough to go to school. His grandmother taught him hymns. His grandfather taught him chords. And between the two of them, they put him on a road that he would never leave. Willie has said it himself. They set me on the right road and gave me the right thoughts. I feel like I owe everything to them. Johnny Cash picked cotton in Dyess, Arkansas, a New Deal farming colony carved out of swampland during the Depression. His family sang gospel together in a house that did not have indoor plumbing. He grew up knowing what hunger felt like, knowing what it sounded like when his mother prayed over an empty table, and knowing that music was the only thing in that house that cost nothing and gave everything. Glenn Campbell picked cotton in Delight, Arkansas.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce a friend of ours who hosted our summer show and did so well that this coming January, he's going to have a show of his own on CBS called The Glenn Campbell Show.
The seventh son of 12 children, and his father bought him a $5 guitar from the Sears Roebuck catalog because it was the only gift the family could afford. That $5 guitar turned Glenn into one of the greatest instrumentalists country music ever produced. A man who could sight-read any arrangement put in front of him and play rings around studio musicians twice his age. Waylon Jennings grew up in Littlefield, Texas, learned to play on a guitar that was bigger than he was, and was performing live on local radio by the time he was 12 years old. Kris Kristofferson, the outlier, was a Rhodes Scholar who studied literature at Oxford, flew helicopters for the Army, and then gave up every safe career path available to him to move to Nashville and write songs that nobody wanted to hear until everybody did. None of them were supposed to make it. All of them did. And the thing that tied them together from the very beginning was not just the music. It was the understanding that they had all crawled out of the same hole, and that the only people who truly understood what that cost were each other. Outlaw, brotherhood, bonds. What made these men different wasn't just the music. It was the way their lives were stitched together behind the scenes, far away from the spotlight. The world saw legends. It saw sold-out arenas, gold records, and award shows. But it never saw the real story. The late-night calls, the quiet acts of loyalty, the kind of brotherhood that only forms when people survive the same storms together. Willie Nelson and Waylon Jennings weren't just collaborators. They were sounding boards for each other's souls. There's a story Willie used to laugh about, calling Waylon at 2 in the morning with a melody stuck in his head. Waylon, never one to sugarcoat anything, told him it was garbage and hung up. Willie called back. Same result. Again and again, until finally Waylon admitted one of the melodies was good only for Willie to reveal it had been the first one all along. It sounds like a joke, but it shows something deeper. Trust without ego. Honesty without fear. That same kind of bond existed between Glen Campbell and Jimmy Webb. When they first met in 1967 at a Capitol Records session, their friendship didn't exactly start smoothly. Glen reportedly joked about Webb's hair, but what followed was one of the most important creative partnerships in American music. Webb wrote, "Wichita Linneman, By the Time I Get to Phoenix," and Galveston, all recorded by Campbell, and all now considered timeless classics. Those songs didn't just define careers. They blurred the lines between country, pop, and soul, reaching audiences far beyond Nashville. But the real test of friendship came when things fell apart. In the early 1990s, R on 24, R on dollars, when Willie Nelson faced devastating IRS debt, reportedly over $30 million, the government seized nearly everything he owned. At a time when many distanced themselves, Glen Campbell did the opposite. He invited Willie to perform and made sure he got paid enough to stay afloat. No headlines, no credit taken, just quiet loyalty. Willie would later joke about the situation, but he never forgot who stood by him when it mattered. That sense of shared struggle also connected Johnny Cash and Glen Campbell. Both came from hard beginnings, picking cotton in Arkansas, understanding a kind of poverty that never fully leaves you. It gave them a perspective that fame couldn't erase. And then there was George Jones, a legend in his own right, but also a man battling demons. One infamous story tells of Jones showing up drunk at Waylon Jennings' house, swinging punches. Waylon, equally tough, ended the chaos by tying him to a tree in the yard. It sounds wild, and it was, but it also reflects the raw, unfiltered reality of that era. These were not polished lives. They lived hard. And when Waylon Jennings finally got sober after years of addiction,
I was on like uppers and pills, for about 10 years. And for about 11 years I was on cocaine. And
$1,500 a day habit, is that right?
$1,500 a day.
For 11 years?
Willie Nelson marked the moment in a way only he could, by cutting off his own braids and sending them to Waylon. It wasn't symbolic in the usual sense. It was personal. A gesture that said, "I'm with you in this, all the way." Waylon kept those braids for the rest of his life. Professionally, their impact was just as powerful. Glen Campbell used his platform on the Glen Campbell Good Time Hour to introduce artists like Waylon and Merle Haggard to a massive national audience, helping bring the outlaw country sound into mainstream living rooms. And when Jimmy Webb wrote Highwayman, it eventually became the foundation for something bigger, a supergroup that would redefine country music history. That group, the Highwaymen, made up of Willie Nelson, Waylon Jennings, Johnny Cash, and Kris Kristofferson, was more than a collaboration. It was a statement, a rebellion against the polished Nashville system. They performed together at events like Farm Aid, stood shoulder to shoulder across decades, and proved that authenticity could still fill arenas. And yet, Beneath all the success, it was never just about the music. It was about survival, about having someone to call at 2 in the morning, about knowing that when everything else falls apart, money, fame, reputation, someone will still show up. Because in the end, what they built wasn't just a legacy on stage, it was a brotherhood that carried them through everything. Until the moment something came along that none of them were ready for. Legends fade first. Before the funeral started, Nashville tried to kill them first. Not with bullets, but with silence. And silence, in the music industry, is the cruelest weapon there is. There is a phrase that should not exist in any world that makes sense. And that phrase is too country for country radio. But that is exactly what they told Merle Haggard, a man who had been making country music since before most of the people running Nashville were born. After Merle publicly criticized the executives who had cheated him out of royalties, the Nashville establishment decided he was a problem, and they solved it the way Nashville solves most of its problems. They stopped answering the phone. For 35 years, his records were ignored by radio. His name was left off guest lists. The industry that he had helped define carried on as though the man who wrote "Mama Tried" had never existed. Merle did not go quietly. He said what country radio was playing was garbage. He said if Hank Williams showed up today, they would not even let him on the air. George Jones said the same thing in his own way. They have stolen our identity, he said. They need to find their own title. When the CMA invited Jones to perform his Grammy-winning song at their ceremony, they told him he could only do it in 60 seconds. George Jones, the man Frank Sinatra called the second-best singer in America, was given 1 minute. He stayed home. Willie watched all of it. He watched Merle get erased. He watched George get humiliated. He watched the music that he and his brothers had spent their lives building get turned into something none of them recognized. Songs about tailgates and pickup trucks with no substance, no fiddle, no steel guitar, and no reason for a grown adult to take them seriously. And he kept playing anyway, because the truth does not need a radio station to survive. Then the funerals started. And they did not stop. Waylon went first. The 13th of February, 2002, 64 years old. His last words were, "Do not let the boys stop playing my music." He said it the way he said everything, like it was not a request, but a fact. Like he was telling the world what was going to happen, whether the world agreed to it or not. The people who knew Willie said something changed in his eyes that day. Something that never fully came back. Johnny went next. June Carter Cash died on the 15th of May, 2003, and Johnny followed her less than 4 months later on September 12, because a man like Johnny Cash was never going to survive in a world that did not have June in it. In his final months, he kept recording, kept working, kept making music that sounded like a man staring directly at his own death and refusing to look away. The last music video he ever made was a cover of 9 Inch Nails' Hurt. If you have ever seen it, you have never forgotten it. 3 minutes and 52 seconds of a man saying goodbye to everything he ever loved, and meaning every second of it. Merle died on the 6th of April, 2016.
Tributes are pouring in tonight for one of country music's original outlaws. The legendary Merle Haggard died on his birthday today at 79 after battling pneumonia in recent months.
Which was his 79th birthday. Willie called him his brother, and meant it the way you mean it, when there is no other word big enough. Glenn Campbell spent his final years in an Alzheimer's facility, forgetting everything except the guitar. His fingers still knew where to go, even when his mind did not. His last original song was called I'm Not Gonna Miss You. And it was about the cruelest thing Alzheimer's does, which is that the person who is disappearing is the only one who does not have to grieve because they will not remember what they lost. And the last album Glenn ever made featured a duet with Willie on a song called Funny How Time Slips Away. They recorded it separately, hundreds of miles apart, because Glenn's mind was too far gone to be in the same room. He sang it one line at a time, because his brain could no longer hold more than that. That duet won the CMA Musical Event of the Year in 2017. And the title became more than a song title after that. It became The Truth. And then Kris Kristofferson, the poet, the Rhodes Scholar, the man who wrote Me and Bobby McGee and Sunday Morning Coming Down, left on a quiet September morning in 2024. When Willie was told, he said, "I am the only one left, and that is just not funny." He was not joking. He was not feeling sorry for himself. He was stating a fact that no amount of music or memories could change. Musical legacy continues. There is a moment that happens to every person who outlives the people they love. A moment where the grief stops being about what you lost and starts being about what you are supposed to do with what is left. For Willie, that moment did not come all at once. It came in pieces. One funeral at a time. One empty chair at a time. One phone number in his contacts that would never ring again at a time. And somewhere in the middle of all that silence, the promise became clear. Not because someone asked him to make it, but because each person he had lost had already told him what they needed in their own way before they left. Waylon had told him exactly. The music is not allowed to die. Not on Willie's watch. Not ever. Merle had spent 35 years proving that Nashville could not silence him. And when he died, that stubbornness transferred straight to the man who had called him brother for half a century. Glenn had proved that the music outlasts the mind, that a man can forget his own name and still find the strings. And that lesson was not lost on Willie, because it meant that as long as you can still play, you are still here. And Kris, the poet, had spent his entire life writing songs for the rest of them to sing. Now Willie was the only one left to sing them. Willie does not perform at 92 because he loves the spotlight. He performs because the moment he stops, an entire world goes silent. Every song he plays carries Waylon's growl and Johnny's depth and Merle's truth and Glenn's guitar and Kris's poetry. The audience that comes to see him is not just seeing one man anymore. They are seeing the last living proof that an entire era actually happened, that those voices were real, that those friendships were real, and that the music they made together was worth something that Nashville was never able to put a price on. But here is the part that lets Willie smile at 92. The chain did not break. Waylon's son, Shooter, wears a gold bracelet with 6 words engraved on the inside. The music is in good hands. Shooter has worn that bracelet while accepting 3 Grammy Awards. When he is not making his own records, he is producing albums for Willie's son, Lucas. The outlaw legacy is not just surviving, it is being passed from one family to another like something sacred. Lucas Nelson was nominated for a Grammy in the same category as his own father, which meant Willie competed against his own son for Best Traditional Country Album. Glenn Campbell's daughter, Ashley, stood on stage during her father's farewell tour and played banjo while he forgot the words around her. And then she wrote a song called Remembering that said, "Daddy, do not you worry. I will do the remembering." Rosanne Cash has 4 Grammys and has spent her career making sure the world never forgets what her father's name means. Ben Haggard took his father's bus, his father's band, and his father's songs back on the road because someone had to. Willie sees all of this. He sees the sons and daughters picking up guitars because they heard their parents playing one in the next room. He sees the chain stretching forward into a future he will not be alive to witness, but that he helped make possible. And that is the reason the promise does not crush him anymore. He does not need to carry it alone. What Willie Nelson understands at 92 is something most people only realize in fragments long after the moment has passed. That memory is not passive. It is carried. It is protected. It is performed, night after night, under fading lights and thinning breath. Because as long as he keeps singing them, they are not gone. Not Waylon, not Johnny, not Merle, not Kris. Just present, in the only way time still allows. But even promises, especially the ones never spoken out loud. So the question is not what Willie is still holding on to. It is what happens to everything he's carrying when there is no one left to carry it for him.